With the NHL playoffs only a month away, we're diving deep into some of the dark horses poised to make some noise come April on the latest edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We got to show you some overlooked pieces that could make some noise down the stretch as well. Big time bets for our one-game betting board. Which one of these teams is going all the way? Tune in, tap in, and let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's the Sick Boy edition of your nearly daily source for fantasy hockey, NHL news, and betting breakdowns. The dynamic duo is whole once again, back in the booth for the Friday edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. It's March Madness, baby, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, which today's episode is brought to you by. New customers to FanDuel get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 wager hits. I don't know about you, Steele. Thursday, first couple of games, easy peasy, clean sheet for your boy. I might as well pack in and take my money now. However, we'll still get to big-time bets. NHL bets is where we butter our bread. I want to talk about these dark horse teams on the bubble right now or currently holding down a wild card spot that we think have the best shot at perhaps making some noise come the end of April. I got a few overlooked fantasy players that you could probably snag for value on these teams. Steele, who are you looking at first and why? I've got two teams in a spot. I got two teams out of the spot, and I think that's kind of the two obvious ones and the less obvious. I'm excited to hear what you have to say, who you're looking at and why.
Yeah, well, I'll start in the Eastern Conference, make it easy on ourselves. And, you really can't ever, you really never can say never. I think all teams, if they get into a postseason, if they're in that wild card spot, they have a chance. And I know I was just ragging on the New Jersey Devils the other day after losing Dougie Hamilton, after losing Jack Hughes, that they have no chance, no possibility. Again, I kind of, you got to take that with a grain of salt. They're still, you can never count out the 8th or 7th seed or the wild card teams.
Sure.
And from the Eastern Conference, looking at how close everything is, the Boston Bruins, Detroit Red Wings, Columbus Blue Jackets, Islanders, Rangers, Canadian Senators. I mean, They all still have a really good chance to make the postseason. But which team do I believe has the best chance to actually make a deep run? Who can make a difference? For me, I've got to go with the two Canadian teams. And at number one, it is the Ottawa Senators.
Okay.
I think going into the first round with them, even as a bubble team or as a wild card team, opponents are not going to want to play them. I mean, the Tampa Bay Lightning, Toronto Maple Leafs, Florida Panthers, whoever it is, they do not want to play the Ottawa Senators at this point in the season. They're playing some really good hockey. They've got multiple win streaks since the Four Nations face-off. Really good goaltending from Allmark offensively. The physicality that they've brought to the game as well with Dylan Cousins kind of changing that aspect. We've been hearing for a long time the Ottawa Senators needing to make a big splash, needing to make a big change. They do that, and look at how it has worked out for them in the time for the time being. Adding Dylan Cousins, losing Josh Norris, changing the dynamic in the locker room. I think with Brady Tkachuk as your captain, just like we see with Matthew Tkachuk in the playoffs, we're going to see a different Brady Tkachuk because it's going to be his first time. It's going to be his first time in the postseason, and I'm just trying to bring up the Stanley Cup odds right now.
Love that.
With these bubble teams that we're talking about, the odds are not going to be great. Ottawa Senators at plus 4,100.
Whoa!
Right now for the Stanley Cup. So I mean, it's pretty decent. I just really think Brady Tkachuk is a different animal, and he has that aspect as a captain to lead this team, and that's all about when I talk about the Montreal Canadiens, who I think could be a dark horse in the playoffs as well in that second wild card spot. Nick Suzuki is a very underrated player in the National
100%.
Also a very underrated captain. I think at such a young age, he has really taken on that leadership role, the opportunity under Martin St. Louis to become that beacon of hope in Montreal. Same with Cole Caulfield, hitting 30-plus goals for the first time in his career as well. You go back, what year was that? Was it 2020 when they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals?
I
and
think
lost.
so. Yeah. Maybe
Yeah,
2021, but one of those
maybe
two.
2021. It was 4 or 5 years ago when they make that deep run. You look at some of the guys, the culture guys on their lineup, and honestly, I don't love Brendan Gallagher, but he's just one of those guys who is passionately loved in Montreal, who makes a key difference in the postseason atmosphere in front of the net, antagonizing. So for me, I think all teams still have a chance in the Eastern Conference, but the two top ones, Ottawa Senators and the Montreal Canadiens. I like the fact that 6 out of 7 Canadian teams right now have a playoff spot. There's going to be a good chance of it coming back to Canada this postseason.
I hope we didn't just jinx it. 8 points separate the 13th spot Boston Bruins to the 7th spot Ottawa Senators. So here's what I got to say about them Ottawa Senators. First and foremost, this trade for Dylan Cousins up the middle. Everyone's talking about Cousins, the workhorse from Whitehorse. I got to get that plug in. He's been throwing his body around. He's been winning friends and influencing people, or whatever that saying is, with his physicality and his engine. But how about what it's done for 2 players on his line? And I'm looking squarely at David Perron, first and foremost, for a little bit of overlooked fantasy value, because you ain't getting Drake Batherson. By the way, Drake Batherson himself, reborn over the last few games, Steele, and that's what I wanted to also mention, that this impact of the trade should be looked at with a bit of a wider lens. Over his last 7 games, David Perron has 5 goals and 6 assists. There is value to be had with this player. And I just wanted to also throw this out there, Steele, that when it comes down to this team at the postseason, there is the difference maker now in the cage, and Linus Ullmark. It's been covered at length. I agree with you in terms of Ottawa's value. They're on my list. I threw in David Perron as an option that you could go after here, because this Ottawa team is going to be lurking. They're playing important hockey all the way down the stretch, and that means to me you can cash in on a little bit of fantasy value quickly. Let's stay out east. My other team, you know what it is. Igor Shesterkin. You got Adam Fox on the back end. You got Breadman up front. You got a reborn Zibanejad. You have the pieces to win a Stanley Cup. Same song and dance with this Rangers team, except now they haven't been performing during the regular season. They've been so close. They've been knocking on the door. They've looked like, we've been the Blue Shirts podcast. They have the 7th best penalty kill in the NHL, Steele. What's been letting them down this year is goal scoring and power play. They are 25th in the NHL in power play proficiency at a somewhat embarrassing 18%. You know how I feel about special teams headed into the playoffs. If they can turn that number around, I have no problem calling them a dark horse that is actually worth a little bit of Stanley Cup bet value. I don't see it as much with the Ottawa Senators, although plus 4,100 is juicy. I like the Rangers, and I got to give some love to my boy West End Fern alum. You've heard it here before. Will Cooley has been on a heater. And once again, and man, I've been brutal with my tabs today. But once again, he's hot of late, and you can get some value with Will Cooley down the stretch. Over his last 5 games, he has been putting up points once again, a goal and 3 assists. He's second in the NHL in hits. That's enough said. Rangers deserve some attention. Don't sleep on these teams that are looking like they might fall out of it while they still have a shot and they still have a ton of fantasy value that you can plunder.
Look, you know how I feel about the New York teams. I've always viewed the Islanders as a dark horse club every single season, who are just just an above average team that seem to play such a stingy defensive team, boring hockey. That's how a lot of people view the Minnesota Wild as well. I know we're going to get out west after the break. I had the New York Rangers to win the Stanley Cup at the beginning of the season. That went right out the window, right with Jacob Trouba, right with all those trades they made this season. JT Miller's in the mix. You know how I love JT Miller. So you know how I feel about the New York teams. I always think that they're in the mix, even though, everyone is in the mix right now. For me, it has to be the Ottawa Senators. I just think the culture, it's not a winning culture yet, but they're almost there. It's changed though. Yep. Steve Stais has changed it. The new management has changed it. Front office, everything. Yep. Travis Green behind the bench as well. I just think when everything right now is coming to fruition, and when you get Brady Tkachuk in the playoffs for the first time alongside all those other players, Tim Stützle, Jake Sanderson on the back end, Linus Ullmark once again in the playoffs for a new team. It's going to be a good thing. A lot of Ottawa Senators fans out there. And again, I just think the Atlantic Division, it's going to be tough. I think Ottawa Senators can make a difference.
This is going to be a tight finish. Make sure that you stay tapped into the pod. We'll have you covered all the way until that cup gets lifted, prepping you for next year's fantasies, playoff pools, bets, future bets, whatever you need. We're here every single day, 30 minutes in and out with everything that you need to dominate your leagues. Today's episode is brought to you by someone new.
Did you know getting a good night's sleep is the #1 recipe for long-term success in life? I didn't. It took me way longer to realize than I'd like to admit. It was years of tossing and turning. I was always tired. I never felt like I could live up to my potential, but not anymore. Thanks to Bear Mattress. I used their sleep quiz and I matched with the Elite Hybrid. It's perfect for side sleepers like me. Now I wake up energized. I'm getting deeper sleeps and I'm ready to attack the day. No matter how you sleep, Bear Mattress has a match for you with a focus on recovery, cooling, and pressure relief to upgrade your sleep and improve your overall quality of life. Go to bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout for 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Don't worry, Flip. We'll get through this. It's going to be okay for us out here.
Heyo.
That's something new for sure.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the follow button. We appreciate all that love and support you show us on the channel. Thank you so much for all that love. Let's go out west.
Yes.
Dark horse playoff teams, overlooked fantasy assets right now.
Yep.
It's obviously not as tight as the Eastern Conference, but you still have a lot of teams battling for position right now. Even with the Minnesota Wild in that first wild card spot, I don't want to officially say it's locked up, but it's pretty much locked up. 83 points for them. Then you have Vancouver at 75 points, St. Louis at 75 points, Calgary at 73, Utah at 71, and then I guess I'll throw them in there, the Anaheim Ducks at 66 points. Out of those really 5 teams right there, who are you looking at as a dark horse in some of the fantasy assets they have on their team?
Yeah, let's get the obvious one out of the way first, just based on sheer point standing and where the Minnesota Wild currently find themselves. It has to be them, and it really comes down to, for me, and this isn't a bold take because of how important goaltenders are in the playoffs, but what you've seen from Philip Gustafson over the last 2 games, and I understand that it's LA and Seattle, if he can continue to string together performances of 30-plus saves a night and allowing a goal or less, this team's going to be hard to deal with. Not of exactly rocket science type take steal, but when you run back the list of players, and it's funny because I was just talking about like the real stud goaltenders that really kind of instill not only fantasy confidence, but just overall confidence in these teams. I think what's been kind of clear over the last handful of seasons, take a look at it with Adin Hill, Darcy Kemper, run it back a few years, J.S. Jaguar and other players in Yaroslav Halak, goaltenders out of nowhere stealing the show. So when I look at these teams that I'm talking about here, Philip Gustafson, bit of an unsung hero. Why not? And the other team I want to talk about, Dustin Wolf. Why not him? All the tools to be that kind of goaltender that could give the opposition fits. And this is first team to 4 wins steal. And a goalie gets hot, much like Gustafson is right now. That's why I'm looking at the Minnesota Wild actually above all of these teams. But that is also based on what they've been able to do this season. If Kirill Kaprizov makes it back, it's a whole different ballgame for this team because they've been doing exactly what you've said, treading water without clearly their number one guy. So if you could actually maybe get a little bit of a value bet in here on the Wild while the number is still high, and they get a healthy and hungry Kirill the Thrill back, and Gustafson is going in hot. I know that was a lot of buts and ands. There could be a nice little value bet coming in here on the Minnesota Wild from your boy. But the last name I wanted to throw out here is Jared Spurgeon on the back end has been putting up some sneaky good numbers this season. 4 assists over his last 4 games, chipping in with some hits, chipping in with some block shots. You're talking about overlooked value because of a guy who's up there in age and doesn't always jump off the page. 28 points in 54 games still, to me, still has value. And if you're looking at a team with very good plus-minus numbers for their players, then you win a category as well with Jared Spurgeon. That's my take on the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, look, can I pick nobody from the Western Conference? Is that
Sure.
allowed? Can I pick 0 teams? No, I'll pick one. And look, you're right. I'm with you. It's the Minnesota Wild for me. If it's not them, it's the Calgary Flames.
Yeah.
When I look at the other 3 teams in competition right now, I can't even dive into the Vancouver Canucks. I just think completely they've lost their identity completely. Some goaltending situations potentially in the playoffs. I honestly don't think Quinn Hughes is also built for the postseason as well. Like we talked about last year, which we have seen. St. Louis Blues, they're not there. I like what I see from Utah with all the young guys they have. Clayton Keller taking a step up. Karel Vejmelka. I just don't think it's their time. And the reason why I'm saying no one is because regardless of who finishes in the first and second wildcard spot, you have to go up against the Winnipeg Jets. You have to go up against the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, those are like the toughest of tough asks at all to do this postseason in the first round, especially. And then you still have the Colorado Avalanche and Dallas Stars potentially. It's absolutely insane what's going to happen, but it has to be the Minnesota Wild. And it's for the same reason when I talk about the New York Islanders, just a dark horse team. They always have a chance. They're always in it somehow, even if they're getting ragdolled 38-21 in shots and 41-20 in hits. They're somehow still in the game, maybe even potentially leading.
Resilient.
Do it right now. And again, the Minnesota Wild have all they've had to do for the time being is just tread water, survive, make the postseason. Look at who they're missing right now. Kirill Kaprizov, Joel Eriksson, Jonas Brodin, Marcus Foligno, Marcus Johansson, Marco Rossi. A lot of Marcos in there, but they're all right now. Those are key guys for their lineup. Obviously, Kaprizov, and they're still 2 points back of the Avalanche.
Interesting.
Central Division. I think this is a very dangerous team. I think obviously it doesn't look that way on paper. I think they have a very physical. They bring a very physical aspect to the game with all these guys. I think Gustafson is, like you said, that unsung hero. You have Marc-Andre Fleury. Maybe he's not in his prime anymore, but that is a goaltender I would love to go to battle with as a backup. So I like this team a lot. They're my favorite team in the Western Conference, second favorite all time right now. I just think if they can get fully healthy, if they go up against the Vegas Golden Knights in the first round, that is a very intriguing matchup for me. And I look at guys like Mark Rossi, potentially a Ryan Hartman, Frederick Gaudreau in the bottom 6 to make a difference, but especially Marco Rossi. And I know he's gone cold recently for the Minnesota Wild. He's struggled since Kaprizov's injury. He chips in here and there. I think that is a guy who has still been undervalued all season long in fantasy hockey leagues. And going into the postseason with Kaprizov back, Eriksson back, can make a very contributing difference in the offensive zone. Plus 3,400 right now for the Minnesota Wild.
Don't take your foot off the gas as a fantasy GM, still in the mix. You're running out of time, but if you stay tapped to the pod and make sure you check in on your team once a day, you are in much better shape than your competition. However, Steele, I want to talk quickly about the Flames after the break. One game on the board, same game parlays coming in hot.
Big time bets coming up next. Yeah, I want to talk about the Calgary Flames as well. That could be a dark horse team, a team that makes somewhat of a threat in the first round. That coming up with big time bets and more. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Daylight savings really snuck up on us again. And if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through the day. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. Whether I'm at a game or traveling, the on-the-go convenience of 5 Hour Energy, it's easy to grab and keeps me feeling refreshed all day long. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery store or convenience store. They're absolutely everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We're going to get to big time bets. Only one game on the schedule Friday. Columbus Blue Jackets going in to Pittsburgh, taking on the Penguins. Let's talk about the Calgary Flames real quick, and then we'll get over to big time bets. I also wanted to talk about them because I think they could potentially do something in the playoffs if they make it in there in that second wild card spot.
Yeah.
Again, tough ask if you're going up against the Winnipeg Jets.
For sure.
However, that would probably be the best matchup for the Calgary Flames is the Winnipeg Jets. Two Canadian teams, very physical aspect of the game, loaded on the blue line with big guys who can make a difference, moving the puck, so helping in the offensive zone, obviously defensively shutting it down. The big difference, obviously, is in the blue paint. Dustin Wolf against Connor Hellebuck, if that were to happen. But for the Calgary Flames, that was the question for me. Can Dustin Wolf continue the success he had in the regular season going into the postseason? And, I just think, obviously, for a rookie goaltender or a very young goaltender, it's a very tricky situation. You have to be that guy. It's a different beast, different animal. He has it in him, but can he deliver at this point of his career? I just don't know if he's quite there yet. But when you look offensively, I really like Jonathan Huberdeau this year. He looks back to his normal self from when he was in Florida. I think it just took him a while to get, acclimated into a Canadian environment in Calgary. He feels at home now. He feels comfortable. It feels good. Nazem Kadri as well, veteran Stanley Cup champion with the Avalanche. Up and down the lineup, some really good veteran leadership, and Backlund and Coleman. So there's some pieces on this team. I don't think they're as quite good as the Minnesota Wild, obviously, but I could see them being that team as well.
It's two words for me, Dustin Wolf. And this guy has really played himself into what I think is next year a potential top 5 fantasy goaltender. That might be a little bit of a reach because of the other goalies ahead of him, and he is on the Calgary Flames. But I don't think he's going to be much more than maybe the 6th or 7th goalie off the board. Otherwise, I think that's a mistake. Also, how did he fall to the 7th round, 214th overall in the draft? Some people were sleeping and slipping, but I urge you to not. 22, 14, and 5, 3 shutties, 2.62 goals against, and a .912 save percentage. Jumps off the page steal. He rolls into Winnipeg, a team that we know have had their first round struggles. Again, we're just hypothesizing, throwing things out there to see if they stick. But if that happens, I got 2 eyes wide. And this Calgary team has chose a really poor time to play some of its worst hockey of the year over their last 10, 3, 4, and 3. And also, Steele, digging into this squad a little bit, they have scored less goals than the Islanders, Ducks, Sharks, Predators, and every other team in the NHL this year. A league low 170. after Nas and after Huberdeau, there hasn't been a ton to go around there in terms of offensive punch. But if you're looking at some under the radar overlooked fantasy players, as I threw out for you on every other team today, this is my favorite one, especially because what I saw from this kid the other night from Matt Coronado. 5 shots on net. He can really rifle the puck. I think we've been waiting for this kid to do something.
Yes.
I'm looking at him next year, Steele, as a we're talking about dark horses, dark horse fantasy piece. Double circle it for next year. I forget who we were talking about, Dylan Holloway for next year. Throw Matty Coronado in the mix too, because this kid can shoot. 17 goals, 17 assists. Doesn't jump off the page. But how about I throw this at you? Right now, playing with Huberdeau, playing with Frost on the second line, and getting a real good look on the top power play with Weegar, great year, Huberdeau, Nas, and Frost. I'm loving Matt Coronado right now. I don't know what the Calgary Flames will do if they don't start scoring goals, but I like Matty Coronado as a sneaky little ad here down the stretch. If he goes cold, let go of him. But I say right now, grab him.
Look, they're 2 points out of a wild card spot, right behind the Vancouver Canucks there, and they can finish. They can make the postseason. Just have to wait for the last 10 to 12 games of the regular season. Big time bets. 1 game on the schedule for Friday.
Yep.
I'm just going to throw out all 3 of my picks.
Give
There's
her.
no reasoning behind them. It's just going with cold.
Okay, right off the hit.
Feeling right here. Number 1, Malkin, anytime goal. Number 2, Crosby, anytime assist. And 3, Penguins on the money line.
Yeah.
The Blue Jackets. Same game parlay. 3 picks, lock of the night. Penguins money line.
Well, let me bring a little bit of a statistical angle for you, Mr. Roden, because you know I got your back like that. The Pittsburgh Penguins, Sidney Crosby-led show are 6-1-3 in their last 10 against Columbus. Pens, money line, playing much better with Tristan Jarry for the most part back in the cage. That's intriguing. We're not talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins because that is a pretty serious stretch, although 7 points out with 12 games to go isn't unheard of. And last year, Sid went off at the end of the season. And guess what he's doing once again? Over his last 24 games played, the man has 22 assists. Let me get it out early because you know I'm here for the brand. Lock of the night, Sidney Crosby, anytime assist. And I got more numbers for you. 2 games this year against the Columbus Blue Jackets. 4 assists. I think you know where I'm going with the math on this one. In his career against the Columbus Blue Jackets, 44 games played, 43 assists. Lock of the night easily. Sidney Crosby, anytime assist. I love it with the Pens money line. I'm going to take the total down to 5.5 and take the over. Smash those 3 together. I haven't felt this confident about my same game for a hot minute. Also take in 7 out of the last 9 between these two. Over the number, boom, back. Give me my loot back. Here is comes the big night for the boys.
Same game parlay. We're going heavily with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. From your boys here, Flip and Steele, we wish you good luck with your bets. Good luck with those weekly matchups, the playoffs, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.